Hi, so sorry about that. Ready? Could you just give me like 2 minutes? Let me just deal with something quick.
All right, go ahead.
Hi, sorry about that. Good evening.
All
My
right.
name is Paulina McQueen, and this is Adafia Young Lao, and we will be presenting Chapter 5, Understanding Others. Next slide, please. This chapter examines traits related to gender, ethnicity, and culture. It shows how it's important to recognize differences as you work towards inclusive and empowering leadership. Next slide, please. So this is the order of our presentation. So this has all the sub sorry, this has all the topics that we are going to all the topics that we would be presenting on, right? So this is our quote of our presentation. Unless you understand others, you can hardly attain your own self-understanding. In individuality and commonality. Even though some people may look the same, they may have different values, preferences, or learning styles. Some of these differences in ourselves and others may come from our gender, ethnicity, or culture. Some may come from our environments. Others may be very similar to you or very different from you. Finding a common human purpose is the focus on which to center our perceptions of difference. Because in the grand scheme of living human beings, we are more alike than we are different. In any group situation, you can look around and find people who resemble you, whether they be men or women, people of different ages, people of obvious racial or ethnic characteristics, or people who wear symbolic clothing like your own, example, a hijab or a sari. In spite of onward traits that may have at first seem in spite of onward traits that may have at first made them seem unlike you may be able to identify with others when they express opinions you share, relate to your own experiences, or share your goals. Finding people who share your own interests can lead to a sense of association known as social identity, and the identification of subcommodities. Examples of these shared interests include majoring in the same field or living in the same neighborhood. Social identity can be defined as a person's sense of who they are based on their group's membership or memberships. Finding the purpose, vision, and shared commitments that we form a we from a group of individuals is a challenge of community. The challenge of leadership is coming from common purpose from the vast differences that individuals bring to a situation. Taken from the leadership text, the English language may well be the only one that values the individual to such a degree that the word from the first person singular I is capitalized. This emphasis on the individual is grounded in a Western tradition. Those with non Western roots may find it easier to envision we because the cultural traditions emphasize the collective, the family, or group. To truly establish the sense of we, the individual needs to let go of self enough to see the connection to others. Berber, 1958. Berber, 1958 encouraged the exploration of I thou. Leadership educations have encouraged I into you, into we. This may best be expressed symbolically by showing that the focus on the individual I needs to be de emphasized to truly listen and engage with another you as equals so that all can move forward and become a community we. The two challenges we face are to engage in the hard work of understanding others so that together you can form a meaningful community and engage in coalitions of group change, and to engage in the hard work of understanding yourself well enough to know that how you are seen by others and to modify your own behaviors and attitudes to encourage a spirit of openness and connection with others. Understanding gender diversity. The characteristics of gender differences are too numerous to develop fully, but it's important to realize that we all deal with both sex and gender roles. Gender roles are frequently restrictive and inaccurate when applied to specific men and women. For example, even though only women can bear children, women are not the only sex to be nurturing of children. Although two terms are frequently used interchangeably, sex roles are those expectations resulting from biology, like pregnancy or muscle mass. Women may be athletic, but it has been challenges for them to participate in sports that require high physical contact, like cricket or basketball, because those sports are perceived as masculine. Historically, men's involvement in the development of children has been limited because the role has been considered feminine and nurturing. Similarly, those who subscribe to the controversial leadership expectation that leaders should be decisive, in charge, competitive, and self reliant may be only so in accordance with a traditional masculine paradigm that excludes many women as well as many highly competent men who do not lead from that perspective. According to the leadership text, even parents who make sure their children read books that do not promote gender role or sex role stereotypes and who give dolls to their sons and trucks to their daughters quickly realize that other socialization agents like peers, toys, and television and conversations on the bus going to school every morning reinforce traditional gender messages. To understand how men and women have come to be as they are, we can learn from children's development. The way we play as children establishes patterns of how we work and communicate as adults. Many boys may learn to be tough, objective, unemotional, and competitive, while girls may be polite, caring, emotional, and supportive. Even outdoor games like video and computer games frequently have elaborate hierarchical systems with complex rules and procedures that involve controlling and defeating enemies and are frequently preferred by boys. They often play rough and tumble games sometimes involving extrovert leaders that shout commands in competitive settings. Most of these games are played using teams, whereas girls, however, frequently engage in quiet indoor play with one another or with a small group of friends, emphasizing closeness and valuing interpersonal connections. Some of their favorite games include jump rope and playing with Barbies, which have no winners or losers and everyone gets a turn. Intimacy is crucial in a world of connection where people negotiate complex networks of friendship, minimize differences, try to reach consensus, and value the expectations, the appearance of superiority, which would highlight differences. Social learning that occurs with play and many other expectations frequently leads females to seek and value intimacy and relationships, whereas males frequently seek and value independence. In a world of connection, intimacy is essential because people strive to minimize differences, reach consensus, and value the appearance of superiority to that would draw attention to the differences. In a world of status, independence is essential because telling others what to do is a key component of status, and following orders is a sign of low status. Remember that there is a great variation between men and women, but these patterns do raise awareness and understanding of differences. Men and women tend to hold different attributions for their success and failures. Many women tend to credit their successes to external factors like luck or being in the right place at the right time. They attribute their failures to internal factors like lack of preparation, proficiency, and time. Contrary, many men have a tendency to blame external factors like fate, other people not doing their part, or bad luck for their failures while attributing their successes to internal factors like being capable and prepared. Both sexes are capable of making wise decisions, exercising effective leadership, acting as responsible group members, and clearly communicating, but they may approach these tasks in different ways than the other sex would. Because men have traditionally held many visible leadership positions, the controversial paradigm of leadership was often socially constructed as giving these male characteristics. Sex and gender, however, is the only identity's perspective we bring to a situation. All other we all have other salient social identities that are based on characteristics such as our culture, ethnicity, age, and sexual orientation. Understanding cultural diversity. Culture is the body of common understanding that describes the thoughts, feelings, and behaviors of a particular group of people. The term culture refers to a totality of ways of living, including values, beliefs, aesthetic standards, linguistic expression, patterns of thinking, behavioral norms, and styles of communication, which a group of people has developed to ensure its survival in a particular physical or human environment. Many cultures coexist simultaneously in any group, making culture a broad concept that could be used to describe a school or a job or school, agent, or a group of people who share a common race or ethnicity. Leaders must learn to appreciate multiculturalism in order to foster inclusiveness, collaboration, and common goals. According to the text, the majority norms frequently because the standards used to judge others who are not in the minority, which has prevented the dominant culture, the culture in the powerful majority, for having to examine its beliefs and practices because it is not adversely affected by them. In general, it can be helpful to consider the privileges that any of us may enjoy due to personal traits that place us in a significant majority, and to carefully consider how unintentionally affirming those privileges may actually lead or to influence the cruelty of others, even though it may be unintentional. Understanding international diversity. Understanding how to work with persons from other countries is even more complex than it can be exciting. More complex, but it can be exciting and rewarding experience. At times, it can be very challenging. Managers need to acknowledge the cultural differences and similarities among nations, as well as the understanding of the implications of those differences. Global leadership development leads one increasing one's adaptability, cultural empathy, acceptance, and ambiguity, lack of xenophobia, cultural relativity, awareness of one's own roots and cultural biasness, and as if quality. Project Globe, global leadership and organizational behavior effectiveness, an exclusive international study of thousands of middle managers defined culture as a set of shared beliefs and values, in which the values are people's aspirations about the way things should be done, and the beliefs are people's perceptions of how things are done in their countries. This study defines 9 dimensions of culture that differed from country to country: assertiveness, future orientation, gender differentiation, uncertainty, avoidance, power distance, power expected to be shared unequally within the culture, situational emphasis on collectivism versus individualism, in group collectivism, memberships in small groups and families, performance orientation and humane orientation, fairness, generosity, caring. So this part was taken from the text. As the world becomes more connected, understanding other nations becomes more crucial. It's an area where students can do better. Your cultural heritage. Have you ever read about a group that is different from your own to see how you may have acquired the values and beliefs of that group and how you have diverged from them? You may see similarities or even learn something new entirely. For example, in China, their zodiac sign is very important to their culture and they take it very seriously. And like me, food is life. It would be very helpful to be aware of the assumptions that a person entering a group may have. It is it would be helpful to be aware of the assumptions that a person entering a group might have that would influence the person's behavior. Example, for carnival, we censored worship carnival. We would take loans to go buy a costume, pay a car payment on a bra and a underwear, and we would have the best time. Or for carnival or for Christmas, we would be cleaning just to spend one day. Diwali, we would buy roti and we would go light deers and all these different things. Building multicultural appreciation. We must learn more about cultivation, our openness and appreciation of various cultures and aspects of how others may vary in order to be an effective leaders and participants who bring variety to our organization. David Hoop's 1979 presents an intercultural learning process model that describes how we develop and learn to communicate clearly and understand people and cultures that may seem different from our own. The first stage is endocentrism. People with endocentric views can be intolerant and even hostile towards others from different cultures because they hold the belief that their own culture and way of doing things is superior to others and therefore the best. From this foundation, racism and sexism develop. As our experiences grow, we start to break free of endocentrism, and our awareness of the diversity of culture grows. As our understanding of culture deepens, we reach a stage of comprehension derived from our experiences, knowledge, and learning. Learning about other cultures is somewhat objective in this transition and is more thought about than felt. These two phases of awareness and comprehension result in the readiness to accept and respect the fact that others do hold a legitimate cultural perspective. This tolerance has instead resulted in the acceptance that it may be okay for others to hold the views and values that they do from their cultural perspective, rather than the examination of one's own culture. By valuing and recognizing some aspects of other cultures, the process of moving from tolerance to multiculturalism increases. The strengths, assets, and value of um, other cultural perspective has been acknowledged. This does not simply imply that everything about the culture or the way of life is valued. A person can incorporate values from another culture into their own life out of admiration and free will. Multiculturalism is the end goal, which is an outgoing process of comfort with learning about and appreciating another culture as a lifelong learning task rather than a final state. This willingness to try new things enriches one's life and makes it possible to share cultural elements with others who might find them valuable, even more open, being more open to another person's legitimate viewpoints and moving beyond our own limited perspective is one of the advantages of multiculturalism. This appreciation should lead to an understanding of opposing viewpoints, not necessarily an argument or even an easy time making decisions. So, I have a question. How has your culture or environment affected the way in which you engage with your peers? I will go first. I work on an age group from 18 to 25 years. The conversations they would have, I could barely relate to because my environment I grew up in and the one that they are currently exposed to is very different. My parents really didn't let me go out, and now that I am older, I am now experiencing the things that they are already going through, probably at 17 or 18 or maybe 15. For instance, I do not see the appeal in going out to Lime on the Avenue at all hours in the morning. I would prefer to stay home. Like now, I have the option to go out, and I really prefer to stay home. Um, Worse, like they would go out and they would have to work the next day, and they would be party jumping, and they would either call out from work or they would come to work the following day, and then they're tired and they're useless to the shift. So now in my head, I'm judging you because one, I never grew up like that. Like they have to be in everything. So I am now schooled. It's either I am judging or I am scolding you because to me, coming to work, this is basically a livelihood, and you staying home because you either went to a party and you're tired, or you're on the shift and you're making it harder for everybody else because you are not pulling your weight because of said party. Or they would not, it has some people, they would save for a rainy day, you would save for a specific period where something might go wrong. There's always, you must always have a rainy day fund, or you always have a vex money. They would just wait till payday, so they would spend their money, and in the middle of the week they have no money. And it had this particular instance where they were paid late. So they normally get paid on a Friday. They got paid the following Monday. So everybody was scrambling, and I had to pull on us, and I said, listen, these things happen. And I understand that you guys, you will have a lot of stuff to do, or you're probably saving for something. Or like that particular person, she likes to eat. So she would buy food constantly. Like like even if this particular thing doesn't happen all the time, you still need to save something in case it does happen. So I don't know if y'all are like me, y'all could share your story with me. Hello.
Well, I believe this is all just what we just talked about, preferences. Everybody has their own preferences, and that's theirs. That's why we had the core thing with feeling and thinking and judging and perceiving. Some people are just careless and lackadaisical, and they themselves, they have to understand themselves in order to change. Even though you from a different culture and you may want to, to put your culture probably, or try to get them to change to be more on the straight side, there's nothing you could actually do unless they themselves understand themselves and change. Maybe in time to come, as they mature, they may change.
You are
That's just
right.
my take on it.
You are right, because these are the same people that they depend heavily on their parents and stuff. Like they don't have to pay rent, they don't have to buy groceries, or they'll probably, if they're making a contribution, it will not be as much, so they may not feel it as much as everybody else. But even when I was in their position, like I never used to do all of these things. Like I would always have money just in case. But these are the same people that if something is to happen, they always find a way. Like they're very resilient. I like that about them. They just always find a way regardless to make sure that they have. But thank you for sharing your story. So now I will hand you over to Adafia, so she will explain um, the other six subheadings, right?
Hi everyone. First, we'll be discussing attitudes towards differences. So, to explain this section, I'll be using the theories of ethnocentrism and ethnorelativism. So, the first stage we have is denial. So, people in this stage don't really believe in cultural differences. They think people who are behaving differently don't know any better. These people tend to impose their own value systems on others. They also believe that the way they behave is natural and normal, and the way other people behave, if it's different, is wrong and misguided. These people are not threatened by culture differences because they simply do not accept them. The second stage we have is defense. These people have had an indication that their value systems may not be absolute, and they are not happy about it. Unlike people in the denial stage, those in the defense stage believe in cultural differences and have accepted the reality of it, but they are deeply threatened by it and believe that other values are decidedly inferior. The third stage under ethnocentrism is minimization. So people at this stage are still threatened by differences, that this is why they try to minimize it. They don't think that those who are different are inferior, misguided, or otherwise unfortunate. Rather, they believe that the differences are real, but not especially deep or significant. That as different as people are, they are still more similar than dissimilar. If people in the denial stage deny differences and people in the defense stage accept them but demonize difference, then people in the minimization stage try to trivialize the differences. So the fourth stage, which falls under ethno-relativism, is acceptance. These people accept differences as being deep and legitimate. They know other people are genuinely different from them and accept the inevitability of other value systems and behavioral norms. They still find some of these behaviors hard to deal with or accept, but they are not threatened by them, nor do they judge them as wrong or bad. They are neutral, not positive about differences. Differences are just a fact of life. The last two stages, which are the fifth and the sixth stage, are adaptation and integration. In these stages, behavior as well as attitudes change. These people have gone from being neutral about differences to being positive. They not only accept cultural differences but they are willing and able to adjust their own behavior to conform to different norms. They are able to empathize with people from different cultures. In many ways, they become what is known as bicultural or multicultural, effortlessly adjusting their behavior to suit the culture of the people they're with. They do not give up their own or birth culture values and beliefs, but they do integrate aspects of other cultures into them. Next, we'll be discussing cultural influences on leadership behavior. So, no group is totally homogeneous. We differ in personality preferences, attitudes, styles, value systems, beliefs, and opinions based on our cultural influences. Relational leadership values effective leadership processes within heterogeneous groups. Many leadership practices should be described as participative because they value the empowerment of followers, but relational and pluralistic leadership seek to change the very culture of the organization or group to see the diversity of the group in its truest asset. Lodan and Osana, 1991. It clearly would be inaccurate to describe people based on only one aspect of their identity. It is more useful to observe people's behaviors and seek to understand their attitudes than to presume differences among people that are based only on stereotypes. Communication. So, communication is defined as the process of understanding and sharing meaning. Understanding the mix of preferred communication patterns in any group helps the group to be more informed in its interaction. Instead of judging others to be wrong or disrespectful, it is useful to ask yourself, within that person's context, how do I understand this action or practice? And how would they want to be treated? One aspect of communication we have found to be useful is the idea of speech community. A speech community exists when people share norms about how to use talk and what purposes it serves. This can be important to keep in mind because persons from different speech communities may misunderstand each other. Recognizing and respecting different speech communities increases our ability to participate competently in a diverse culture. It is also important to remember the key role that nonverbal communication plays. We communicate with with our physical appearance, personal space, and facial expressions, among many others, all of which does have cultural components. When we are trying to connect with others, it is imperative to remember that different is just different. Different is not wrong. Conflict resolution. So, conflict resolution is a way for two or more parties to find a peaceful solution to a disagreement among them. The disagreement may be personal, financial, political, or even emotional. When a dispute arises, often the best course of action is negotiation to resolve the disagreement. Conflict resolution is a critical aspect of relational leadership. Among any change effort will involve some degree of conflict. Remaining focused on the purpose of the change while maintaining positive relationships is necessary, At the same time, it is always and also important to remain ethical and inclusive. Now we'll be discussing decision making. The way in which decisions are made reflects either those who value the power of majority rule and prefer voting, or those who seek inclusion of the minority opinion and values consensus. Relational leadership requires communication skills that help each person seek to understand others, not just persuade them. All communicators should constantly ask themselves, how do my perspective and preferences shape my view? And in what ways could I be understood more correctly and with a greater insight? Here we do have 6 types of team decisions. So we could have a decision on an individualistic level. We could also have it minority, which are key individuals, majority, which includes voting, consensus, and unanimous consent. Leadership and communication. So true listening is far from a passive activity. Listening and communicating in a pluralistic context requires one to listen with empathy. Listening with empathy is an intellectual and emotional participation in another person's experience. Empathy means that you are using another person's standards and reference points to understand what a person is experiencing. Whereas the contrast of empathy is sympathy, and that is where you are putting yourself in another person's place, but you are still retaining your own perspectives and still using your own standards of judgment instead of that person's standards of judgment. Now we must ask ourselves, why is communication an essential skill for effective leadership? Leaders must be good communicators because they inspire and empower people around them. And without good communication, a leader will never be heard or understood by others. Therefore, effective communication is an important non technical skill that every leader must possess. Below are some of the reasons why good communication skills are essential for effective leadership. Good communication, well, communication in leadership, it develops bonds. It also builds trust. It encourages active listening. Active listening is very important. It's a very important skill when it comes to communication. It also fosters empathy and establishes transparency. So now we are on to our second question. Could anyone recall 3 of the benefits of communication in leadership? No one recalls? Not even one of the 5 benefits? Not even the key benefit of communication?
They didn't read and they didn't listen. That's what I'm getting here.
Okay, so I'll go over it one more time. So communication develops bonds. It also helps build trust. It encourages active listening. That is what I was saying was the most important, well, one of the most important skills of communication. Active, being able to actively listen. It fosters empathy and it establishes transparency. Now we're moving on to assertive communication. Assertiveness means expressing your point of view in a way that is clear and direct while still respecting others. Communicating in an assertive manner can help to minimize conflict, control anger, have your needs better be met, have more positive relationship with friends, families, and others. In every communication, each person has a right to be heard and a responsibility to listen. Each has the right to make a request or ask a question, and the recipient has the right to make his or her decision without apology. Being assertive does not mean that you get your own way, but you did what you could do to be better understood. In a similar way, practicing relational leadership does not mean that the group will go along with what you think should happen, but that you would have done your best to respect everyone's involvement, listen for true understanding, and be a productive community member. Last but not least, we're speaking about relational empathy. So, working effectively together requires relational empathy. Relational empathy goes beyond merely understanding another and deal with recognizing the importance of context. It may mean creating a new third culture that synthesizes the positions from the two individual perspectives, culture and context, and builds a new culture, an environment of empathy and insight. Conclusion: the ability to understand others, be understood by others, and together create an effective organizational or group environment is the challenge of relational leadership. Truly understanding the influences of other culture, heritage, genders, sex is and other aspects of our difference helps us work together towards change. We usually find that we are more alike than different. And as I said before, different is just different. Different is not wrong. Expecting commonalities, goodwill, and shared purposes can become a fulfilling prophecy. This awareness helps us to create a third culture within any group. Here's a list of our references used. And we thank you for listening to our presentation. We hope it was insightful. It helps everyone to have a better understanding of others. And having a better understanding of others will truly help us as individuals to understand our own self. Thank you, everyone.
So, are there any questions anybody has? All right, if there are no questions, I will stop the recording now.